thereof communicated to the Hopewell Valley News, the Times, and the Trentonian on January 9th, 2018. This meeting notice was also sent to Comcast Cable and Verizon Fios. The board reserves the right to enter into executive session during all meetings of the Board of Education. The meeting is being videotaped for the purpose of board review, future reference, preparation of minutes, and viewing on Comcast Channel 19, Verizon Fios Channel 32, and the school district website, www.hvrsd.org. Mr. Calavita, may I have a call, please?
Mr. DiDonato.
Present.
Ms. Linthorst.
Here.
Ms. Long.
Here.
Ms. Murray.
Here.
Mr. Sawicki.
Here.
And Ms. Tracy.
Here.
Quorum.
Thank you. May we all rise for the flag salute, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like a motion, please, to approve the minutes of August 19, 2019, our regular meeting.
So moved. Second.
Did you get that? Debbie and Sarah?
We all.
I know, thank you. It's the beginning of the year, woo! And on a Monday night. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion carries. Oh. Well, this is a very special time for the beginning of our school year as we welcome our new Central High School student representative to the board. So I would like to introduce Ms. Tana Smith.
Good evening, Ms. Doldy, Dr. Smith, members of the Board of Education. Gives me great pleasure to introduce to you your 2019-2020 student representative to the Board of Education, Zaid Sharif. Zaid is a very friendly, intelligent, and extremely talented student, taking some of our most rigorous courses this year at CHS, including Calculus, AP Literature, AP US Government, AP Computer Science, and AP Chemistry. It's a lot. I know he uses recitation frequently. Outside of student council, Zaid has been a varsity track hurdler since his freshman year during both winter's indoor and spring's outdoor season. Additionally, he was elected the National Honor Society tutoring chair and was chosen to be a part of our school's leadership corps, very important group at our school. Zaid has been the president of the Model UN Club for the last 2 years, where he has won multiple awards for himself and the club as a whole. In his free time, Zaid enjoys running, making funny videos with his friends, and learning how to code. He can also be seen cheering at our football games. Go Bulldogs. I present to you Zaid Sharif, this year's student representative to the Board of Education.
Hi. Hi, so, yeah, I'm Zaid Sharif. As she said, I do a lot of stuff in the high school, and I guess because of that, I was elected to this position. So for past events in the high school, we started this school year off at the freshman barbecue and orientation to help the freshmen become accustomed to the high school way of life. And then on the first day of school, students were welcomed back to school. Seniors were especially happy with their new IDs and Chromebooks and their new senior privilege. In sports, football opened the season this Friday and won with a final score of 21-0 against Lawrence High School, starting off the season 1-0. In soccer, the guys are undefeated at 4-0, and the girls are 4-1, suffering their first loss sadly this weekend. In field hockey, girls got a 6-0 win against Ewing, making their record 1-3-1. And in volleyball, girls got a 2-0 win against Princeton Day School, making their record 1-2. So for upcoming events this September, the main one being homecoming. So September 27th, during the school day, which is a Friday, we'll be having our pep rally, which we have every year. And this September, it will be mainly focused on homecoming court to elect our homecoming king and queen. And then during the homecoming tailgate, which is after school before the football game. It will be held in the athletic lot and will start around 6. And there will be booths for high school clubs, games, and other activities. And one thing that's new this year was that we, as student council, create a competition between the classes where the class with the most amount of participation in Spirit Week and most amount of people who show up to the tailgate will win a $750 prize going towards their class fund, which will really help towards their prom and junior prom planning. And lastly, on Saturday, right after homecoming, which will be the 28th, there will be the homecoming dance, where this year we hired a real DJ with his own setup at the request of many, many students. And we'll be using the community room for food and drinks. And this year we'll also be having a photo booth, which you might see in pictures. That's it.
Very good. Thank you so much. Welcome to the board. We'll try not to bore you, even though that's right in our name. Just be aware that when you're planning for your future, Dr. Smith is going to continue to hound you every meeting about what you're doing, where you're thinking of going, and ultimately your plans. So you're kind of like going to be in the hot seat now.
It
It's
doesn't
okay.
hurt to give a preliminary ask.
Oh, well, that's not my job. That's his job to hound the students.
Right out of the box.
Dr. Abrams said that this was the most intimate question they're asking of students in SAT scores. So I reevaluated my. So if you would like to share, it's up to you.
My ACT scores?
No.
That was awesome.
No, just your college process.
Oh, just my college. Okay. So, yeah, right now I'm currently in like the beginning stages. I got all of my testing done last year, and my main, probably top school that I would like to go to is the U.S. Naval Academy, because over the summer I attended a week-long seminar there where I was chosen to attend, and I really liked the atmosphere, like the culture, and I'd also like to serve after college. And second option would probably be like NROTC programs in any college really, but Naval Academy is definitely the top.
Excellent.
Ooh, very good. Well, we'll
Mr.
be
Markulek is
excited.
not here.
Yeah. Very cool. Well,
I
lots
believe
of
we
luck.
have a Naval Academy graduate. I don't. All right.
Well, welcome to the board, and we're excited to have you. And we really appreciate your service to us, because otherwise we'd be clueless, or at least almost clueless.
Pleasure.
Guess I'm on deck. Whoops, lost my little switch. All right, here we go. So convocation this year was held bright and early on the 3rd, the day after Labor Day, so you can imagine that there'd be a lot of like real tired eyes coming in. But Dr. Smith ensured that it would be very well received. From the cherry picker of a fire truck, Dr. Smith orchestrated the Marching Black and Gold, boys and girls sports teams, district PTOs with students and families, the board, and a line dancing administration to clap in our district staff and cheer them on their first day of the 2019-2020 school year. It was really quite a sight to behold, and it was just incredibly impressive. So for those of you who were able to make it, thank you for coming, and for those of you who didn't, then you missed a big party. I'm impressed with the exciting, pleasantly eventful transition to school mode throughout the district. The first back-to-school night at CHS was filled with caring educators that promoted attentiveness towards students and families, academic integrity, we heard that a lot, thank you, Ms. Smith, and accountability. I attended the first home football game of the season, which you heard about from Zayed, and I was pleased with the new bathroom facilities. You forgot to mention that. Did you see the new bathroom facilities? It's really awesome. They're completed now and open, and they're just off the turf field. It's very impressive for people to come and to our events. The Tollgate Grammar School will benefit from an agreement between the school district and the Pennington Borough for the borough's acquisition of house habitat to create a borough park for the entire community to share. In addition, our attention and focus on all things student and staff wellness is truly admirable. From the community conversations and project with Dr. Jennifer Rich to changes in homework policy to align with current research, and the formation of a later school start time committee to flesh out research and options for our district, to name just a few things. The social emotional learning climate within our district continues to make progress supporting our students. I am truly grateful for the agreement providing additional teaching minutes by our middle school educational professionals, which allows for a scheduling change in the coming school years, with our Ed Program Committee having previewed this morning. This will allow more time for our educational community to collaborate and for students to access the resources they need to succeed. Our board, administration, staff, and district community has certainly showed their willingness to work diligently and make decisions that provide the resources for a learning environment that is consistently puts our students first. And with that, the rock star.
Yeah, sure. No, no.
That's amazing.
So tonight we have two presentations. I will be the first, and then Rosetta will be the second as part of our budget reviews. This is number 2 of our budget reviews. We're starting early with that, but I would just like to echo the board president's sentiments about the start of the school year. I got to visit all the schools on opening day and also throughout the last several days, and so far I would say it's a smooth start with little issues, and it's nice seeing the kids back. We missed them while they were away. It was good to have the parents on the opening day. So we're hoping for a fun, non-eventful school year as we move forward. All right. So I will begin, Mr. Calavita, if you could beam me up. Alrighty. So as discussed as part of our review of the random drug screening policy that we enacted last year, we committed to an annual review before the board, an update of where we are. So we have discussed the policy previously, and this is a more formal review of numbers and where we are as a district. So those of you who haven't been on the board or weren't in the initial conversations, the discussion began several years ago, one being from the questions that were on our annual climate and culture survey. You can see the numbers there, but also something I think it was most startling for parents and district folks was the rankings that we achieved, and not one of the rankings that we were pleased of, but in the state reports and in the media, our increase in substance abuse use. And the rise between 2015-2016 school year to 16-17, we were number 7 in the state for our increase of substance abuse. So that really started conversations in the community and larger conversations and questions about what we were doing about it. And it was no secret, and I said this in our letters to the community, like most school districts in the country, we have a drug problem at our high school. And that is something we've tried to work on through a variety of factors, but this was one of those steps that we took to address it. The program really was developed based on 2 foundational beliefs, and as you look at it, Robbinsville just recently passed one. Our goal was all about support versus punishment, and the board spent a lot of time in conversation about how we could support our students, and if you look at it, it's until the very end that students receive any sort of level of punishment. And also, if we can delay the onset of drug use or diminish the frequency of those students using, that this would allow us to help students in a lifelong pursuit of healthy living. Questions that we've been asked, this is one aspect, but what else do we do? And we have a lot of programs to support our students. We have programs down as low as in 5th grade, and actually we're talking with Campfire, who's going to be providing some social emotional programming to us, taking this down even further, because 5th grade kids are seeing, thanks to social media and the media in general, are hearing a lot about use and abuse through that. This is done through health classes and school-based lessons. Our Municipal Alliance, I have to give a huge thank you and shout out to them. Heidi would be here tonight, however, she's at the Township Council discussing opioid abuse there with them and our Chief of Police. We've done a lot of work, and the board has done a lot of work to expand our extra and co-curricular activities. We know that those hours after school, those latchkey times between 3 and 6 p.m. are critical times in the lives of our students. The board expanded. You heard volleyball. Volleyball didn't exist 5 years ago, as well as the number of activities that we've expanded. We just got a report today that our after-school bus at the middle school, 60 kids were waiting to use the bus. So we're trying to take away all those barriers for kids to be here, be in a safe environment right after school with that. And I think the result has been more opportunities for students, and the board also took away the user fee that was in place for many years, again, to get more kids involved. We partnered with the Search Institute that, again, came through the Municipal Alliance to help us understand at-risk behaviors. We're still culling through the results of the Mercer County Partnership for a Drug-Free Alliance. The students took those surveys last year also. So that information will be coming in the next few weeks. And really looking at the anecdotals. Our kids are open to sharing. They share a lot of information, and looking at our discipline data and working with our police to see what our kids are involved. There's things that we have here that other districts don't have, and that's we have students who do have a lot of disposable income and also time, and that increases the ease of access to illegal drugs. So here's a 3-year view of our data of drug infractions. So the 16-17, you'll see that we had 24 drug infractions. 2017-18, we had 7, and this is specifically at CHS. And then last year we had 3. So kids got in trouble for other things, but these are specifically targeted drug infractions over those 3 years. So we have seen I would argue, significant decrease in students being tested positive for being under the influence at our high school since this program went into place. The big question is, why did we do this? We hope that it would serve as a deterrent, a reason for kids to resist. I know in some conversations, and we've had focus group with students, that they have said that this has given them a reason to say no and to not get involved. We also know that this can help identify students who have started using illicit drugs, and we'll talk about the data tonight, but I know, and Principal Smith is here also, of those parents we spoke to, I think the vast majority of them were surprised by the results and really took action, and we'll talk about that. And one of the things we heard when we had students coming in under the influence, not only the concern about the district wasn't doing anything about it or students, but we also heard about the classroom. Kids were either under the influence in class or at lunchtime and what that was doing. But in additionally, the possibility of students going out during lunchtime and this open senior lunch and coming back under the influence. The random testing flow chart. This was a question of how this works, where the positive and negatives. One just quick aside, based on conversations with the board and based on our community discussions, there was a concern about having the tests completed in school by a school district employee. Those concerns were that school district employees may or may not work for the district. Could they potentially pick students who they had suspect about, or that they, I know we were accused at one point of the possibility of somebody tainting a sample or something like that. We have contracted with an agency that does several districts in the state of New Jersey. They come in, they conduct the testing, they give us a list of students. They're located in Ohio, so they give us a list the night before, and the students are called the morning of, and the test is conducted. The students are brought down to the nurse's office. So as you go through the test, if the test is positive, the medical officer, who is not employed by the district but is employed by the testing company, confirms that positive, and then the student has 5 sessions with the student assistance counselor. Then they go for a retest, and if necessary, they're subject to a retest for 6 months after that. If the student tests again positive, as part of that retest, they then have 10 sessions with the SAC. Now the student stays in activities, but does not compete after that. So for any student to be, so they don't compete in an activity, they have to test. They have to be randomly sampled, and then they have to test negative twice. Test positive twice, sorry to confuse. The testing company makes the determination and determines whether it's a false positive or not. They go through that process on their own. If the student is negative in their test, they are returned to the pool. So I know there was some confusion about that, but if a student tests negative, their name is put into the random number generator, and we do have some students who were tested more than once in the school year just by happenstance.
Just to clarify, Dr.
Yep.
Smith, the students are identified as a confidential number throughout the entire process to the pretty much the very end, right?
Correct. We'll talk about that. So, but yes, so we give the company a student number, and they shoot a number back to us, and then that's how they're identified.
Good.
So yes, we heard that students may have been picked or chosen, but we really have no participation in the selection of students. So one of the things we committed to, or the things that we committed to as part of this, that we would monitor the program for adverse effects, and that is decrease in sports and/or extra and co-curricular activities, which was a concern brought up through initial, and we have seen no evidence of that. Breaches of confidentiality, we have had no evidence of that either from this first year. We have not seen any increases in substances are not included on the testing panels, to our knowledge. Have we seen increasing in mental health needs and disciplinary actions? We have not seen an increase in disciplinary actions. I would argue we have seen increases in mental health needs, but that is not necessarily, I don't think there's a causation between this. I think it's a lot of stuff going on in the world where our students are needing help. We also committed to an annual report to the board with statistics, and transitioning now will take you over to some of the data of the program. And this is all available online for those. You can refer back to this at another point if you want to see. But so last year, the 2018-19 screening data included 936 students who signed up. That was 83.5% of the school population. In ninth grade, 292 students signed up. The number in the screening pool were 214 for 73%. And you can see these numbers for yourself. As expected, the majority of kids who have the most privileges, one being driving, a prom, et cetera, were the seniors, and we had a percentage in the pool of 92% of those.
If I can ask one
Yep.
question on the chart?
Yep.
From the standpoint of the percentages, like the percent pool, students who were eligible from co-curriculars and stuff, is this consistent with our historical data?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I will say in terms of, and Tana, you can help me with this, I believe our testing company said it's one of the highest return rates they had seen, particularly for an initial year. So people participated. So our positive screenings, here's more data. So 389 students were tested. That's 34.7% of the school population. 3 students were randomly selected twice. 11 students tested positive. That's 2.8% of the tested population. 1 out of the 11 students tested positive twice, and 1 student out of the 11 tested positive 3 times. 10 out of 11 were male. 8 seniors, 2 juniors, 1 sophomore, and the range of substances was from THC to amphetamines for that.
If the range is from THC to amphetamines, like how many different substances?
Tana, I think it was
Like
really
what
just,
else
it's probably clarifies this. So, and other questions we received from parents, particularly when you allude to amphetamines, was the question about prescription of drugs, and sometimes ADHD medication will come up as an amphetamine. If a student, these are students who are tested positive for an illegal substance. If you tested positive for a substance that you have a prescription for, that was not part of this. The medical officer contacted your parents. You had that conversation. We were not involved in that conversation at all. Only when it was tested positive, when it was determined that it was an illegal drug, or the parents were unaware of the situation, that's only when our student assistance counselor was notified. But the initial conversations, I don't know the names of the students. I don't know there's 11 students. The student assistance counselor knows the name of those 11 students, and is continuing to work with them. Obviously, the student who's tested positive 3 times, they're working very closely with him and his family to get some supports and help. Again, here's a situation where the parents were totally unaware of the student's situation, and the student clearly had a problem, and the parents are working with him to get him some help. And I say male only because there were 10 out of 11 were male, so I don't think it has any bearing. So some things that we came through as we worked through this with our policy. We had some issues with timing. As students would enter the pool, they would enter the pool and then and withdraw from the pool just to buy tickets. So we set a date in September where a student needs to opt in or opt out, so we could continue through the process. Other thing we worked at was assigning numbers distinct from the student ID numbers, and we changed it to distinct from student state ID numbers. So the students are also assigned a number from the state, so we didn't want that to be an issue because that is also their testing number, so if that were to get to anybody. So we changed that. We fixed that early on, but that was just making sure that the policy reflected that. This is again going back to what I discussed. The test coordinator or designee will conduct the initial onset test of the specimen. We did not do that where we were taking the sample, but all the tests are completed in a certified lab for testing. Again, there was concerns that either our people weren't trained well enough or there would be some ability to taint it.
Dr. Stern,
Yes, ma'am.
with these changes, has anything impacted the cost of the program?
No, these are really just reflecting some changes that we made throughout the school year and the policy to reflect. So here's one, it came up also, was the student may participate as long as the student meets the requirements of a treatment program. For one of the situations we faced was athletes who could be under a performance-enhancing drug that came up on us, and say if they had an event that night and we received information that day that they were either taking amphetamines or taking something like that, where does the liability lie? Working at that, that's where we put this, and they can certainly participate, but they have to get cleared by a physician that says that they are able to compete. And again, not putting that on the coach, that the student can participate in practices with the coach advisor approval. This is adding that physician. Again, if a student is, one could argue that THC is not necessarily a performance-enhancing drug, but clearly amphetamines can be. So to make sure that the student is well cared for, that they would be cleared by a physician prior to practicing. Other questions we received is what qualifies as an extracurricular activity. We added dances and all-night volleyball because there's some folks saying, well, what exactly is, and this is consistent with other districts who have done this also. They had seen some of the issues. All-night volleyball, again, students are with us for the majority of the evening. I would argue that we have responsibility for them during that time. And that concludes kind of the changes that we suggested and some of the data. I'm happy to entertain any questions by the board you may or may not have.
Oh, I had just to clarify. So one of the first slides you showed was the 3-year review of CHS data with drug infractions.
Correct.
So just to clarify, that reflects cases where we had a student who was suspected of being under the influence in school, and then we handled it per our standard protocols.
Correct.
So that's separate from the random.
It's separate from the random testing, but we got to random testing because of the number of students who are, you know, at 2016, 17, we had 24, which is a lot.
Any other questions from the board?
How have the families responded to this when, I don't know, we've just heard a lot of feedback of families being concerned about the program, and now that
Mhm.
it's been in place, are you getting more feedback from families pro or against, or any other feedback?
Yeah, I mean, Tana, you could probably speak to, I mean, you've had conversations with the parents involved, but also parents.
The parents involved were extremely supportive when we were going through this. Some might have suspicions that their child may have been using, and this, clarified to them some had no idea at all. And so that was something that concerned them, but they worked very closely with us and the assistance counselor throughout the course of the year to really make sure that they were seeing the student, addressing concerns, working towards positive goals, working with the parents if there's any outside support that was needed. And so every time that I had to get involved in call, it was very supportive.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So moving on to budget discussion number 2, curriculum and instruction. Dr. Treese.
Oh, click.
And after this section of our budget discussion, we will have an open public comment. So that's coming.
Again, I know that I've been invited. Am I on?
Yeah, but you know, Rosa, before you start, I'll just frame it to sort of, since we have an audience. But based on board feedback, we wanted more in-depth discussion of programs and how the budget is built. Because the budget is approved in May and we have a lot of different programs, we're starting. We started actually this summer. That's available online, that programming, but this is curriculum instruction, arguably our most important program in the district. It's what we do, we teach and learn. But Rosetta is the first one, and this is budget presentation number 2. It's the first one of the school year. And for the coming months, if you want to stick around, we will have a department each month tied to the budget, and you'll see numbers at the end. No, you got it. Just say count 1, 2.
Clear.
There you go.
Okay, so here's an overview of what my responsibilities are as Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Again, as Dr. Smith stated, I am in charge of what I think is the heart of what we do here as educators. I'm in charge of all the teaching and learning that goes on in the district. So I oversee all the district's instructional programming from K to 12. You're welcome. Sorry, thank you. I provide guidance for curricular development for all of our departments. I act as a district liaison between the local colleges and universities, but also I sit on committees with my counterparts in sister districts, assistant superintendents and directors of curriculum in the local districts that partner with us on development. So we have lots of conversation around curriculum and teaching and learning and professional development across districts and with higher ed. I'm working with Tony Souza, who will talk about this with you a little bit more during his presentation on Blended Learning Initiative, which is the next initiative that came after our one-to-one program that started at the middle school with our computing, and so now we've elevated to blended learning, which Tony will tell you a little bit more about during his presentation. Identification of areas in our policy where we need to revise based on curricular and instructional changes that we make. I work with the policy committee and folks that sit on the ed program committee to identify those needs for policy to make sure that the instructional and programming changes we make stay and are memorialized in our school policy. I oversee the supervisory structure here, and all of the supervisors for all the content areas fall under my purview. I coordinate all staff development, seek and apply for grants for those that we are eligible for. And I develop and manage instructional accounts in the district budget in terms of all instructional accounts. advancing our equity mission, which ties to a lot of our instructional programming. And finally, the preparation for CUSAC this year, we will be monitored by the state. CUSAC stands for Quality Single Accountability Continuum. I know that rolls right off the tongue. But curriculum instruction is a large area that they will audit when they come in and do their monitoring this year. So here is the supervisory structure that falls under my purview. The Office of Curriculum and Instruction staff, which is me and my secretary, Martha. I know that's a huge staff of managing the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, in addition to all the supervisors that you will see. We have K-12 history, visual arts, and performing arts, Now TV Studio with K-12, our coordinator of K-5 CNI, director of STEM, who manages math, science, and all STEM programming, K-12, English and media specialist supervisor, language arts and business supervisor, and athletics and wellness supervisors fall under my purview. There was another supervisor that we will be phasing out at the end of this year, so we've consolidated. This structure is a consolidation of soon absorbing one supervisor there. In addition to that, the registrar falls under my purview. There are currently now 2 secretaries in that position, which one will be phased out as she retires. So we're cross-training a second supervisor and phasing out one that exists in our current staff. Again, I provide guidance for curricular development. So all the curricula, K to 12, and there is some collaboration with pre-K as well, which falls under the Office of Pupil Services. That presentation will be coming here at a later date. We work together to make sure that we design that programming all with the idea of equity in mind. So a lot of the programming that we have in place now and curricula we have in place now are specifically designed to raise rigor, but also to make sure that all our students have an equal chance of making it to all those AP classes that we were talking about earlier. We're in charge of the adoption of all textbooks, software, supplemental instructional materials should be approved and come through the Office of Curriculum Instruction and through the supervisory structure underneath my office. I perform all the administrator as far as supervisor observations, annuals. I do some teacher observations and support staff observations, annuals, and walkthroughs as well. Okay, instructional programming. Recently, program initiatives that I've been focusing on are equity. Again, our programming instructionally kind of evolve around that. So the move to reading and writing workshop, eliminating the advanced level reading and really doing a differentiated structure for reading and writing to make sure that our students are really becoming good readers and writers as they go into the middle school. And then that roll up that curriculum to the 6 to 12 programming has been a large part of that equity work. That also has taken place in our math programming with teachers sitting on those committees and identifying a math workshop model, which also provides students an opportunity to not only elevate the level of rigor, but to differentiate their math instruction K to 5 so that they are ready for those advanced level math courses that exist at the middle school. And that has also caused us to have to revise and revisit our math curriculum at the middle school, in addition to the monitoring that I do of the student data that comes back from our testing on the state assessments in New Jersey Learning Assessment Now, PARC previously, NJS before that. My office also monitors that data and looks at when we need to make instructional changes to improve our student performances on these assessments. Specifically, that work was done around the way our students were performing in math, and lots of curricular changes were made to specifically middle school math because of the gaps that we determined from that data analysis. STEM education and the expansion of STEM facilitators at the elementary level is the work that has gone on as a result of Tom's vision of the pathways, which much to his chagrin, we've kind of eliminated at Bear Tavern, but I'm excited because we've expanded that offering for all students. We did such a great job that we were able to offer that to all of our students now, K through 5. Social emotional learning, where can we marry that to our existing curricula in language arts, social studies specifically, but also science and math. We're looking at all the content areas where teachers can do social emotional learning lessons and instruction right in the classroom. And Exceptionally Able, our gifted and talented programming, also falls under the Office of Curriculum and Instruction. I mentioned previously the pathways at the high school now. We have offerings in STEM, pathways for graduation, performing arts, and soon to come global studies. I coordinate all the staff development for the district. We have 3 full professional development days, 3 half days that we coordinate. Some of those are district level. Some of those are the principals conduct those with the help of the supervisors. Ongoing trainings throughout the year, including our new staff development, mentoring, but in addition to that, providing support to the new programming, reading, writing workshop, math workshops, mindfulness, all of the initiatives that we have ongoing. I make sure that I work with my supervisors and teachers to provide that professional development, or we collaborate with consultants to provide that professional development to the staff. Since I've been in this position, I've tried to work hard to make sure that we are absorbing a lot and doing a lot of those professional developments ourselves. I myself conduct a lot of workshops with the staff, but there are still times when we need to bring in outside consultants to take us to the next level of that training. So we're trying to do a nice balance between us becoming trainers and doing the work, and then also bringing in coordinators to do this work with our staff. Again, I shared this already, but just to go a little deeper in what it looks like as a liaison with the local universities. I work with universities like TCNJ, Rider, Princeton. I sit on councils with them. They provide professional development to our teaching staff, that the people that sit on these panels and councils help them to identify the needs in our districts. We also work very closely with them to develop new teachers, teacher placement for teaching, new teachers, student teachers that come out of the programs. And as a result, they've changed their programming based on our needs, saying, you know, as we hire new teachers, maybe not necessarily from their university, but many times TCNJ, Rider, and Rutgers students do end up coming to us to work as new teachers. We're telling them what program needs we need for our new teachers coming out, what they need to do to prepare them better for the classroom. So that's been a great partnership. So here are the dollars and cents. So a large portion of my budget is educational supplies. That's our general classroom and building supplies, textbooks, workbooks, consumables. This year's budget was quite hefty. We have a lot of the STEM facilitators supplies in here, the new equipment and technologies that they're using, laser printers, cutters, all of those things are in here. Anytime a new textbook is rolled out, I pay for that initial textbook, and then that falls under the replacement textbooks, fall under the principal's budgets at that point. I carry all the salaries for the supervisors and myself in my budget. The purchase services, services like our softwares, our on-course, where student learning and management system, where parents can go on and check grades, and also where teachers keep the on-course classroom. That falls under my budget, and any other software platforms that we use. And staff training, those consultants will fall into that account. Professional development monies. Again, this includes the professional trips, conferences, teachers training. AP teachers must be trained and certified by the College Board. PLTW, Project Lead the Way, which is our pre-engineering program that we use for STEM. Teachers have to be sent away and formally trained for that and certified. But beyond that, any other trips that we budget for, conventions that are coming up, for example, the science convention is coming up, the convention for autism, we budget a certain amount of monies for teachers to go attend those conferences and come back and turnkey their colleagues. Professional memberships that my supervisors belong to fall into these accounts, as well as below that, the ESSA grant monies, the monies we receive from the state for Title I, that's our free and reduced lunch students. Title II, Title III, our immigrant and our ESL students, and some monies under Title IV for school climate and culture and professional development. And those are not part of the tax levy. Those monies are assigned to us through the state. Okay, was that the last one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any questions or about any of that? Anything you'd like me to elaborate on?
I did have one, Rosetta. Just from the standpoint of how it affects the overall budget, in terms of supervisors falling under there, having the number decrease over the next couple of years, obviously will be good from the standpoint of the total cost. I guess the question I'd have is, given we had an existing structure, what are some of the things that have changed that allows us to go to a smaller number of supervisors? Like, I recall a number of years ago, in terms of the number of observations, it was pretty onerous, so.
Well, again, the observations that the supervisors cover, we also have the VPs that are doing observations, the principals, building principals that are doing observations. It is an increase of some observations. Dr. Smith, Mr. Suzo, all of the administrators are involved in doing the observations. I don't think the increase in the observations are arduous for anyone.
Okay.
It is an increase in responsibilities for the supervisors. But we have done some things like in the past, the world language through ESL supervisor and the performing arts supervisor, they did not have the responsibility of teachers that they were supervising because they taught a class. Well, they no longer teach classes, so that responsibility has been removed, and they're able to use that time now to observe and to take on more teacher observation. So I think that the balance is there. I don't think that we've tipped any scales where somebody has more work than they can handle. I think the work has been distributed in a way that our supervisors continue to be effective and teachers can continue to get the feedback that they need. And the vice principals also had responsibilities that they kind of hadn't had for a couple of years, and now they'll be assigned more responsibilities as well, which will be good for their development.
No, thank you very much.
That was a good question. Thank you. Any others?
Just a quick question, Rosetta. One of the things that through the last budget process, the board charged you and the administrators with trying to cut sections at the high school and find some cost effectiveness in that way. I know we're kind of early on in the new year, but I wonder if you're getting any feedback on that, or maybe Ms. Smith could speak to that as well in terms of some of the changes at the high school.
Well, we did have some students that were not able to get their choices. It wasn't a large number, and it is frustrating because in the past we've always been able to say yes in those cases, right? And we ran classes with very small sizes that we just really can't accommodate anymore. I think overall the process went well. It went as well as could be expected, but there are disappointments that occur. But again, I think the number of students that were affected, that while it's disappointing, it's really something that we're just going to have to really. This is the way we're going to have to function moving forward, because this is the way most districts function. You don't always get your choice, and that's unfortunate. But I think that as we move on, things will hopefully get used to the new way of doing things.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, did you want to add anything? Or?
But to your point, Deb, I think if the question was, will we eventually see a decrease in staff at the high school, which I think the conversation was, first we're decreasing electives in smaller level classes and adding sections in the core classes. So hopefully English 4 will have more sections of lower numbers. But then once we go through that cycle, then we will begin to eliminate those courses also. I mean, it's not fun if you look at it, because we're talking about eliminating sections, eliminating positions, and we hope to do it as we did on the elementary level through attrition. So as we get there, we look at the sections. If somebody retires out of the language arts or history department, we look at, do we no longer run those electives? And that's the sad part, because some of those electives have really been impactful on students' lives, and they, we heard loud and clear from the community is, there's nice to haves, and there's, requirements. So we've had a lot of years where we've been able to provide nice to haves that I would argue made a difference in kids' lives, but we're at a point now where continuing that's going to be difficult.
Well, I think to piggyback on how this process has panned out, one of the things I appreciate is that the district has gone above and beyond to try to ensure that there is a resource if a kid has an interest, and there is some place where that child can get even if it's through like a Syracuse University or Rider or Princeton, that the kids have the option, because a lot of schools don't have those options, but we ensure that there's a resource for those kids if they have an interest.
Yes, in many of those cases, those other opportunities were offered, whether or not parents decided that that would work, or that was up to them, but we did offer other options.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Anything else from the board? Well, then now we will hear from our audience. Members of the public are invited to address the board on any matter for a maximum of 3 minutes during this portion of the meeting. You are asked to state your name, address, and municipality. In response to your comments, the Board of Education may respond or direct the superintendent to do so. The board may also opt to take the matter up at a future meeting so that the matter is researched by the district administration. Public comment is now open.
I would like to make a comment.
You just,
Can I speak into this microphone?
yes.
My name is Neil McGrath. I live at 89 Haddon Court in Pennington, New Jersey. First of all, I'm here to comment on this outrageous abuse of my rights as a parent that Mr. Smith is calling a drug testing policy. Someone was asking how are the families reacting. This is how. Not very happily. And I would also like to point out that a lot of this was, a lot of the information we were given as the reason why this was necessary was either false or misleading. So, for example, Mr. Smith just showed us that drug use went down during the year that he was ringing the town bell, crying about this epidemic at the high school by more than 70%, apparently, between 16 and 17 and 17 to 18. During the period where he was advocating for this policy, he also said public opinion was 50-50 split. Sort of. He didn't mention that a number of those in support came from employees of the school district, and 2 came from testing companies. In my mind, those are not impartial opinions. The ones opposed to it came from actual people. I contacted them and verified it. So that's my first comment, is this entire thing, he has managed to persuade the public that there is some crisis in order to justify this outrageous abuse of parental rights. If a parent wants to test their child for drugs, here's the answer. $5.99, 10 tests, 59 cents. How much money did you waste on this abuse of my rights as a parent? That's a question.
We'll ask her at the end.
Okay, so I would like to know how much money was wasted on this outrageous abuse. Also, are you testing for nicotine? Okay, I know the answer to that question, you're not, which baffles me because it is the single most common and most widely available, heavily addictive substance. It kills 50% of its users, and yet you're not even testing for it. It makes no sense to me. And I really love how you say they signed up for it. You mean they capitulated. Every one of my friends said they did not want to sign that form. But you're saying that 90% of the students at the high school are entitled to some kind of privilege for which they must surrender their rights to obtain? That's not signing up, that's capitulating. And also, by the way, this is not your responsibility. You guys are the Board of Education. Your job is to teach our children. There's a separate branch of government that is responsible for enforcing the nation's drug policies. They are known as the police, okay? So I would like to request that the Board of Education, with all due respect, please educate. If there's a drug problem, leave that to the police. If parents come to you and say, I'm worried about my child, here's their answer. Finally, if, as I suspect you probably will not, you refuse to reconsider this outrageous abuse of your power, then you must allow parents to opt out. That is our right. It is our right as parents to opt out. You do not have that right to make the decision for us. I'm talking to everybody on the school board who voted for this. None of you have the right. And Ms. Smith, my daughter Maura will be in your school next year. You should assume that if you drag her out of the class and force her to produce bodily fluids in front of strangers, you will hear about it. That seems to be the process. The student's name is read aloud over the loudspeaker for the entire school to hear. The child is dragged from the classroom, brought to a room, and compelled to produce bodily fluids in front of strangers. That is something I am not going to subject my daughter to, and I don't think any parent in their right mind would want to. And if they do, then I say, get a grip and parent your own children.
Thank you, Mr. Graff.
McGrath, thank you.
Good evening, Melanie Phillips, Washington Crossing, Pennington Road, Hopewell Township. I have two issues this evening. The first, I want to ask you, if I asked you to tell me by the end of tonight's meeting, how many times will you use the ATM in the next 10 months? What would your answer be? And keep in mind, whatever number you tell me, you cannot change. What if I asked you to predict exactly how many visits to your primary care doctor you'll need in the same time period? Would you feel comfortable doing so? Now, I'm sure that all of you on this board are responsible adults, but 100% certainty is pretty hard to predict. An unexpected financial need might pop up, and no one can know if you're going to be sick. Yet with the changes that you've made to the random drug screening process, that's exactly what you're asking our high school students to do. That newfound interest in a sport, will it be strong enough that a young adult will want to join a spring sport? Could you look inside your crystal ball and tell me that tonight? I was invited to the prom my sophomore year, and I can assure you that just 11 days into the school year, I didn't know the gentleman who would ask me to that dance later that spring. The new September 15th deadline to submit the form instead of the rolling involvement is unrealistic. I ask you, in what world does everyone make irrevocable decisions months in advance? According to the National Education Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, one of the best ways to keep students off drugs is to get them involved in extracurricular activities. This new policy, the random drug testing not having an add drop period, seems counterproductive in that sense, as students will be denied the chance to participate. My second point tonight is with regard to the addition of Go Guardian to each Chromebook. Go Guardian has an anti-theft feature with the ability to, quote, log keystrokes and take screenshot and webcam photos. While I respect your right to track student use, above all, I value my children's privacy, and the ability to take webcam photos remotely, in my opinion, crosses a line. You will assure me that, quote, it can't be hacked, but look at Experian and Equifax and other well-known companies which have been hacked. Are students allowed to use a webcam cover on their Chromebooks? Equally as disturbing to me is the lack of communication from the district regarding this change. Go Guardian recognizes the need for parental notification and notes on its website that, quote, it provides template letters for your school to use to help inform parents. They go on to suggest a notice and consent form be sent to parents. The website states, determine whether your school district should require parental guardian consent or add opt-out language in that letter home. Who makes that kind of decision? How and when are the parents notified of these kinds of changes or updates to the Chromebooks? There are 3 privacy settings, according to Go Guardian: Chromebook only, school campus only, and during school time only. I'd like to know which is being employed by the HVRSVD. So my 3 questions. 1 has to do with the add drop, the fact that that has disappeared. 2 has to do with the fact that I'm asking if my children can have webcam covers placed over them. And 3, how are you communicating to parents the changes in this technology? Thank you. Actually, that's 4. I want to know if this is only being monitored in Chromebook only, school campus only, and during school time only. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Phillips.
Hi, my name is Bill Herbert, and I live at 39 West Shore Drive in Hopewell Township. I just wanted to introduce myself tonight. I am a candidate for the board, and I look forward to working with many of you next year. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Thank you, Mr. Herbert, for attending this evening and introducing yourself. We also look forward to getting to know you. Dr. Smith to address the questions from Mr. McGrath. Sorry that I mispronounced your name there. Just wrote it down. I hear your concerns about the drug policy, concerns about how much money has been allocated to the drug policy, whether or not we're testing nicotine and reason for not testing, how we as a Board of Education could be responsible for instituting such a drug policy. Do parents have the right to opt their children out, and if not, why? And the process misconceptions that may be out there, so maybe you can talk a little bit more about the process. Finally, Ms. Phillips, the concerns about unexpected financial needs, the concern about the September 15th deadline, the ed drop for drug testing, the webcam covers for Go Guardian concerns, and communicating to parents regarding settings on the Chromebooks, which I think maybe Mr. Souza will address. Dr. Smith?
So don't quote me on the exact number. Bob just looked it up very quickly, but the cost of the program last year was $12,000 for the initial program. We do not test for nicotine, as you mentioned, but vaping is a significant concern in the district, and we have been working with the Mercer County Department of Education to address that. And the number, I won't go there, but I know that if you read some of the research, 30% of vapers also use it to vape THC. That was the information that was shared with us, and that's a significant concern for us as a school district. You know, this is a first year of, last year was the first year of the policy. Going back to the September 15th, that was changed because of some of the students kind of working around the timelines. We will review this annually again and see where we land with it. It is the board reviews the policies ultimately, but this was something that we found as a school district as a need because some students were working, you know, were working through the system for their benefit. Tana, if I could appeal to you in terms of the actual process when the students go inside, are they with somebody?
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
And the financial needs, I'm happy to meet with you, Ms. Phillips, at any point. I'm not,
Sorry.
Totally misunderstood my question. It was an analogy, and I guess it didn't go over as well as I thought in my head. But the point is that you're, if I'm asking you to make decisions tonight predicting 10 months in the future,
Gotcha,
you
yeah.
can't do it.
okay. Got it. So that was the September 15th, as it is the September 15th has passed, and we will review it for next year based on the feedback that we received this year. And I think I
Yeah.
hit everything.
No, you haven't. So, excuse me. I'm asking for, you said that this was in response to parents asking you for this. So if that's the case, I'm asking that parents be allowed to opt their children out, as is our right. You haven't answered that.
Well, the answer is the policy is if you want to participate in a privilege.
The answer is no, is what you're saying.
you can opt out of having your child participate in an activity that they have to be tested for.
My cat's dollar.
I'm not going to debate this, Mr. McGrath. We've had this conversation. The policy is what it is.
Okay. My daughter will be in the school district for the next 5 years. This is an abuse of my rights as a parent. You can count on me being here for the next 5 years, every meeting asking the same question. I will not give up. It is my right as a parent to say no to this kind of thing. It is not your right. It is no one else's right to subject my child to this. I don't care how sanitized it is. It's still not your decision. It's not your choice to make.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath. Mr. Suzo?
Yes. In reference to Go Guardian, we're actually not using the product right now, so I don't know where that information came from. Just a little background knowledge, we actually have been using different software programs probably for about the last 4 or 5 years to manage student devices in school. We have no interest in managing student devices outside of school. That's purely a parent decision. So right now, as far as Go Guardian is concerned, it's a product that we looked at during the summer, and we actually will be doing a pilot with a small group of teachers from the middle school and the high school that hasn't even started yet. We haven't even trained them or any of that. We actually will be having a parent program on October 16th at the Performing Arts Center, which will be discussing overview of technology and technology applications. So I would highly advise you to attend that, and we'll share more information. Right now, we don't really have any information to share because we're just starting the process. We are looking as well to provide parents with tools that they could utilize to monitor devices outside of school if they so choose. But the school district has no interest in monitoring devices once they leave our walls.
Thank you, Mr.
And in terms of also just the question about covering the camera,
I don't think, no, they can cover
okay,
it.
my
Sure.
camera's covered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Moving on. Any items of old business you have concerns about? Okay, consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda? Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night. He's tall, dude. Oh, you need his notes? Thank you. Anything on the consent agenda that anyone would like to have removed or discussed? So may I have a motion, please, for the consent agenda?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion carries. Finance and Facilities, Mr. DiDonato?
I have one item to move. We received, actually, I'd like something.
A motion?
Sorry, I'm sick. I'd like a motion to move the donation of a Hyundai Tucson that was given to that's going to be given to the auto shop with a value of $2,538.
So moved. Second.
It's a very generous donation from one of our teachers, Mr. Schrager. Very much appreciated. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion carries.
So tonight we met to discuss a few things, but primarily some of the projects that were ongoing throughout the summer for both the referendum and just general maintenance projects. And I'll break down a little bit of both. But we had some referendum projects that were relating to the media centers, and they seem to be coming along pretty good. And I think we're looking at an October 31st date of completion. So there's still some furniture, things that need to be, brought in, etc. There's the Another project was the vestibules, and I think these are coming along pretty good. All but one elementary school, I think, is had some tiny changes that need to be made, but that we feel should come along good as well. And then we had just general maintenance projects. We had some carpets at Stony Brook to be replaced, some carpets to tile, changes at TMS. The entire district went through a rekeying, which means every single lock was replaced with new keys throughout the district. So that was a big win for security. The generator project seems to be coming along good. There's been a couple tiny hurdles with some of the generators at a couple elementary schools, but they're working through them. And then just general, leftover items, like the black box theaters, and some steps, and just some punch list items that just need to be wrapped up. But overall, I think the referendums, I think we're between 96 and 98% complete at this point.
Were the steps, the front steps, that project still has to be done?
Yes.
When is that slated to?
There's no end, so we're getting it reevaluated by our contractor right now. And as far as it being safe, it's safe. There's just some things that didn't meet our architectural and engineering spec. So we are planning to get them done. It's just one of these items that may not be until summer of next year before it gets completed.
And the theater, is there a timeline on that?
Yeah, so there were a few items, the audio and video equipment for the theater that still had to be completed, and I think that's one of the last remaining items. I think within a couple months. I forget.
Philadelphia Theater?
Yeah.
I hope it's by, I think, the end of October.
Yeah, I mean
The
that's
structure is done. They're waiting for right now the light system and the sound system is being constructed off-site and will be
Okay.
brought on and installed.
gotcha. Any other questions?
Great job, Mr. DiDonato. Thank you. Moving on to personnel. Ms. Tracy.
Could I have a motion to move the personnel?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. In addition to the personnel actions and the various appointments you see here on the agenda, in committee we discussed, actually Tony had laid out the timeline for our search for the K-12 supervisor of special education. Right now, the timeline, ideally, they're hoping to get through the process by towards the end of November with a suitable candidate. And you will notice on the agenda there will be a familiar name that's going to help us out in the interim. Ms. Lacadera will be coming out of retirement and helping us out during that time, which we are very grateful for. A couple of the other things that we had spoke about, and actually there'll be a bit more details for the next board meeting, but we continue to discuss coaching salaries and sort of where they fall. I think I mentioned that in the last meeting, as well as actually in this meeting we were discussing information with regards to salaries of our current campus safety officers and sort of looking at comparable salaries in the county and the area and sort of seeing where they fall as well. So again, there will be a bit more information coming for the next board meeting. And lastly, there is a new screening tool that Tony has uncovered. Now, the Gallup organization has developed a sort of it's a screening test type tool that the district is going to start using when hiring teachers and administrators. The tool is a predictor of the success in 3 particular areas, and that's like an achievement drive, classroom structure, and planning and student and parent relationships. The tool allows the district to examine in their hiring trends, sort of hiring coming in, how well they do, and then how how they do professionally over the, next several years, and be able to sort of collect a lot of data on that and examine sort of various attributes about that person. So it sounds very, very interesting. I think we've just started using it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, so can you benchmark? You can see people's results and compare them to
Yep.
others.
Exactly. So, and basically it'll give you a visual representation for all of your administrative team when they're screening candidates to predict in specific areas whether they're perceived to be successful in those particular areas or if there's areas concern.
Based on how the candidate answers.
Correct. So now as part of our application process, all candidates applying for either a teacher or an administrative job has to complete that assessment in order to be considered for a position.
Any other questions? So all those in favor of, yes, roll call for the personnel actions and extracurricular appointments, please, Mr. Calavita?
Mr. DiDonato,
Yes.
Ms. Linthorst,
Yes.
Ms. Long,
Yes.
Ms. Polaro,
Yes.
Mr. Sawicki,
Yes.
Ms. Tracy,
Yes.
and Ms. Murray.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Ed program, Ms. Ballara.
So everything is on the consent agenda, right? So I don't have to move everything. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. And I also want to point out that Dr. Treese put in exceptional notes in board docs for the committee. So for those of you who were unable to attend, or some of us who had to run out early, all the notes are in there. So I don't want to rehash the whole meeting, but I do want to talk about two really exciting and interesting topics that we went over today. The first was Principal Gianfredi at the middle school has spent a tremendous amount of time working with a committee at the middle school to revamp the schedule starting next school year, to moving to a block schedule with an A-B day, and because of the new contract, teachers will now be able to teach 85-minute blocks, which will really give the teachers the ability to dive deeper into subjects, the students the ability to really get the help and their questions answered. And it will also, through the scheduling, enable students in 7th and 8th grade to have more electives. So it really broadens the experience of the middle school students, as well as deepens the academic core subjects. But anyway, it was such a comprehensive presentation. Not only was it the whole background and all the research that she and her committee did and the site visits to all these schools all over New Jersey, but also her real rollout plan, which includes parent meetings, which includes preview days this year where the students and staff will go through what this schedule could look like, not just for one day, but I think it was 4 days.
4 days.
4 days, 2 different times, once in February and once before spring break. So this is not something that has been considered lightly. The amount of work that Principal Gianfredi and her team has gone through is really to be commended. And I think, as she pointed out, it will be a really great transition for those students coming from elementary school who are used to 2.5-hour blocks of reading and language arts and moving to an 85-minute block instead of everything being, what is it now, even 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Not even 42. Yeah, so it really, it's an exciting evolution, I think, for the middle school. And it will also preserve the teaming, which was a criteria, and it's staff neutral, which was also a criteria for the project. So that is very exciting. The next topic was very interesting and difficult and exceedingly important. It was Dr. Rich came in to present her executive summary to the Education Committee. And as you recall, Dr. Rich has come in as a consultant to help us with our diversity and inclusion and really looking at our district to understand where we are. And she certainly commended, and is the executive summary notes for everyone. So I highly encourage you. I will not do it justice to just give a quick summary about it. So I really encourage you to read it, to dive deeper into it. She certainly commended the district for being committed to creating a community of learning where all diversity is included and accepted, and that doesn't just mean racial diversity. She rightly pointed out that economic diversity, socioeconomic diversity is a pretty big issue in our district. And she did these fascinating focus groups with middle school students and high school students, and it was astounding. I take that back. It was just, it's fascinating how clear it is in the middle school that the kids know what the different statuses are and who belongs to which group and what you need to look like or act like or have to belong to certain groups. And I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I am grateful that this administration is doing the work, and that our Director of Curriculum and Instruction is really working with our staff for culturally responsive learning environments and really looking at our curriculum, because it's not just one workshop and this is over. It is really needs to be embedded throughout our district. So I feel as though we are on the path, in the beginning of the path, but I'm very grateful and excited that we'll continue on this. But I highly recommend that everyone reads the executive summary. And does anyone else from the committee have anything to add about that? Because it was quite powerful, I felt.
The only thing I would add is with regard to Dr. Rich's presentation, I think it's important to note that she felt it was necessary for us to continue our community level conversations. And I know that the district is committed to helping push that effort forward. And it's going to take an entire community to help us work and grow and change. And I think with the tools that she's given us, we'll be able to make some progress there.
Can I ask a couple questions about the middle school?
Yes.
Is this 6th through 8, or you said something about 7th, 8th? Is it all grades?
It's all grades.
All
It's 6
grades.
through
It's all
8.
grades.
But
Okay.
The way the blocks were working, it will enable 7th and 8th graders to have access to 3 electives per year instead of 2. And there's an introduction that she's putting in place to this class called TIMS, which is
Teaching in middle school.
teaching
In middle school.
Teaching in middle- or something introduction.
Yeah. I would characterize it
I think
as,
it's
as an
Timberlane
executive
introduction to the
functioning
middle school.
class.
Timberlane's
Yeah.
class.
introduction to the middle
A
school.
school. So every 6th grader will have that as one of their electives, either first semester, second semester,
And then they'll also get a
media literacy and financial
elective.
literacy.
So they'll get an increase in electives too, but they won't have a choice.
Right, they
Everyone will
have
have to
like
take the
computer
TIMS
essentials in
course.
high school or whatever.
Right, and they will all take
and then
the media literacy.
The 85 minutes are for the core courses, or is like gym is going to be 85 minutes? Everything will
Everything.
be 85 minutes. So
Core and
keeping
non-core.
a 6th grader's attention for 85 minutes is going to be very difficult. Obviously, the teachers will know how to make their breaks and everything, but
Yes,
that is.
you're going to need mind breaks.
Yeah.
There's training,
And-
we're partnering with
mhm.
TCNJ to work with teachers on teaching in the block. Most of our programming now is designed around that, but with the blended learning, that is designed around that with the learning stations to utilize that time in a different way and movement. But the teachers will be needing some instruction on, the traditional stand and deliver lecture does not work in a block. So they'll be working with professors within their specific discipline.
Okay, and 2 other quick questions. Are we losing flex? in
No.
middle school? No. And, I had one other. I can't remember. I'll ask you later.
It'll come.
But thank you, thank you.
Here's a copy of her.
It's really spectacular. Yes, I'd like to see it, yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you. Great summary. Community relations.
So, we met a couple weeks ago, and we met with Liz, who has taken over our social media, since we all have to jump on board social media, whether we like it or not. And she's updated our Facebook page with many links back to the website in hopes that maybe people, when they see something on Facebook, instead of going off on a tangent and commenting on their own, might go to the website and get some answers, or at least find a person that they could direct their questions to. She's also done
PRSD Instagram page, which I just started to follow, and it's great because it has things like, the freshman barbecue was on there, the football game. It's more announcements of what's happening in the district. So that's a quick little snapshot. It's a nice thing to follow, and I would encourage everyone who has Instagram to follow it. She's also using Twitter, which I can't speak to because I don't use Twitter, and I probably should learn to start. But so she's taken on that responsibility and is managing all of that, and has done a great job so far.
I just want to say the Facebook posts have been fantastic. Board meeting, boom, and
Yep.
I share it, and like 20 people like it. Great. So no one can say they don't know anymore.
Oh, and the pictures of convocation. You got to
Those-
check it out. They're really
and
great.
pictures of the jogging training sessions.
Yes.
which is my
Oh,
favorite.
yeah.
That was fabulous. Got to see Dr. Treese, Dr. Smith's dogs. That was great. And then we discussed a little bit about the partnership with the Rec Foundation and the survey they sent out, and we have a speaker coming addressing,
Tuesday, 24th.
which I'm sure is on Instagram and Facebook and anywhere you want to see it. And then we went over and reviewed the letter that Dr. Smith sent out for back to school. I think that was it. Unless you have more. I forgot.
I think that's it. Hopefully you've seen an increase in our social media presence this school year. It's something we're working hard on.
Great. Thank you. Policy, Mr.
Great.
Sawicki.
Okay, can I have a motion to move the policies up for first reading, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, great. Okay, so we've got 3 up this month for first reading. The first one is, let's see, Policy and Regulation 2361, Acceptable Use of Computer Network Resources. Okay, so this basically governs, protocols for use of our computers, our networks, etc. And there are a couple, this has been on the books for a while, but there are a couple key things we wound up adding this time, making some modifications. One was, if you look through it, I know like over the summer we had to work through some issues related to certain things that were went across on some networks related to things that can be interpreted as inappropriate for school-age children, pictures, things like that. And at the time this policy and regulation were written, that was clearly the focus, and that came across. But I think as we've heard over the last number of years, we have additional concerns related to things like diversity, inclusion, things of that nature, and the use of computing network, social media, in terms of how that's affected. So we wanted to put in some language in there that basically said, we're being cognizant of that as well, to emphasize it. Let's see. One key thing was we had in the policy a statement that the board would review the policy and regulation on an annual basis and present, and I think we've been negligent in doing that, strictly in terms of how it was written. So what we tried to put into place was what is good practice and what we're doing. So what we decided to make the change to was, on an annual basis, like we do with other policies like homework, to plan to review this and review the updates with the board at a meeting like this. And we also put in there that we'll do an annual district review of computing resources, safety, things of that nature, like we've done just about every year, like you heard described earlier today. And this way it's put in there for, as best practice. Okay. Beyond that, there are some other things that we put in there, some changes related to our district personnel establishing internet sites and how they're monitored. And we also made one small change related to restricting the use of our computing resources for, it had said they're restricted from commercial purposes, but we also put in political purposes and personal financial gain. So that's what's in those. We also have policy 0171, which is this is the election and duties of the board president and vice president. So I think there were really 2 purposes we put in there. As we mentioned, what we like to do is put in our policies what we're doing now and we think is best practice going forward. So one of the things we did is we put in there the roles that the president and the vice president have in terms of the conduct of the meetings and the role in terms of interaction with the community. So convocation, speaking at graduation, we put in that the president does that, or their designee. Vice president monitors speaking times, for example. The other thing we put in there was this year, for the first time, we had past board member and also some Bob and some other staff members conferred diplomas to family members. And we thought this was a really nice thing, and we felt, well, if somebody serves on the board, you know, there's not a lot of thanks. So one nice thing that they might get to do is be able to confer that diploma on a family member. So we thought, let's go ahead, where could we put it? This seemed to be the appropriate place. So basically we're putting in there that one of the roles of the president will be to invite those people. I will admit we struggled a bit with one thing, which was, you know, we wound up putting in some language about, you know, is there any extreme case where we'd hesitate in terms of inviting somebody? So we tried to put something reasonable in there, to, you know, nothing too onerous. It's essentially, we put in there, you know, the person shall, you know, not have a claim against the board, and shall not have been disqualified due to conviction of certain crimes that would preclude you from being a board member. So remember, with policy, we're always thinking about, what if Jeffrey Epstein wanted to confer a diploma? So, you know, we tried to be respectful, practical, but consider the strange example. That I would say from the discussion, I'd say from the discussion we had on this, 5 minutes was getting through everything, and the other 25 minutes was how do we handle that?
So your deterrence from committing any crimes?
Yes.
Or you won't be able to confer the diploma to your kid?
Yes, that's a deterrent. Okay. All right, so that's the 3 up for this first reading.
Okay, so.
If I could just jump in for one thing. One thing I think the committee really did, which is nice, it's any former board member. So it's not a stipulation of you just rolled off the board last
That's
week.
right.
If you ever served on the board, you have that ability to come and confer a diploma to your child.
Thank you for that clarification. So all in favor of the first readings?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion carries.
Excellent.
Second readings.
Great. Can I have a motion to move the policies and regulation up for second reading? So moved. Okay, great. So here for second reading, we have policy 1220 for employment of the chief school administrator. And at last month's meeting, we basically discussed this. Basically, one of the things we did there was put in what we consider to be the desirable attributes of a candidate for superintendent. It was a policy that came up for review. How do we deal with a vacancy? We put in some additional guidance there. We also have policy and regulation 1240, which cover the evaluation of the superintendent. The changes there primarily relate to the superintendent's evaluation, and they're mainly focused on the fact that we're not dealing with a written report now, we're dealing with a web-based system from NJSBA.
Great. We didn't change a whole lot from the first reading, did we?
We didn't change anything from the first reading on
Okay.
any of the 3.
So we need a roll call for our second readings, Mr. Calavita.
Yes.
Ms. Long?
Yes.
Ms. Polaro?
Yes.
Mr. Sawicki?
Yes.
Ms. Tracy?
Yes.
Mr. DiDonato?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. Board calendars, September and October. We're essentially done September, except for Monday the 30th. School and offices are closed.
Jenny, do you want to put in a?
Yes.
Deb's
I was
not
waiting
here.
for it to come up there so I can see it, but I'll go here. I have it. So I get it. We've gotten away from being right before the meeting, but it's a little bit sometimes better if it's closer.
You wanna
Does
push-
anything work for you, Susan? No, okay.
Just put it on, and I will do my best.
I'm thinking, because we don't have another meeting until October, right? So I'm thinking October. Maybe the 9th?
We're closed Yom Kippur.
Okay.
We could do the 8th or 8th before sundown.
I mean, I can do the 8th. Or we could do, I don't know what's the last September Wednesday. I don't know why we're not locked into Wednesdays.
We're closed.
We're closed on Yom Kippur.
Why am I not in there?
It's on the district
Do you
calendar.
want to stay later
it's not on the
night
board
before
calendar.
Yom Kippur?
That's fine.
Stick on the board calendar? Oh, there it is.
I don't know, Deb's not here to find out how quickly she can get here because we don't have to be locked into whatever, 6 o'clock or whatever time we were doing either. She did like the earlier,
Which day are you looking at?
Tuesday the 8th.
Tuesday the 8th.
4:30. I'll make sure she's here.
Copy schedule.
4:30?
I can try.
Okay.
Can you call it?
Yeah, I can try and call in, and Tuesdays are better for me to call in.
Okay.
Always put the number.
The phone? Yeah. The phone call? Yep.
I know I'm always digging too.
All right, so tentatively scheduled 4:30?
We have an
Yeah, we can
electronic
check with
calendar,
Deb. I
isn't that
can
nice?
shoot her an email tomorrow and see if that has any conflicts for her.
We don't have any ed program in there either.
Yes, there went, and now, it should be on the 14th, but that is at in-service day, so I'm presenting and running workshops on.
What, you can't be in two places at once?
Cannot.
I mean, it looks like you should be able to be with
I
everything.
can, if you push it.
Later in the afternoon, I can run. So I'm suggesting maybe we move it to the Monday before or the Monday after.
Well, the Monday after is the NJSBA workshop. So maybe the Monday before.
I think I can do this. Can you do 8:30?
Yeah.
We can do policy the same if people want to do it at 8 o'clock.
I can't do it. 8
Can't
o'clock.
do it
We
then.
have our training. 7.
And I might be able to drop in.
We've done the, or we could do the Friday before.
Yeah.
Friday the 4th.
That'll work.
8:30.
8:30? No problem.
Time, 8 o'clock?
8:30.
8:30.
8:30 Friday the 4th. Oh, and we have a lot of policies this time. They
Oh,
should,
yeah.
they're minor
This
things,
is a,
but it's a big,
yeah.
if we can get through this, it's a really,
Better start preparing the night of the 3rd.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it really is a big step towards hitting those backlogs. It'll be good. Are we all set, Mr. Caldeira?
I think so.
All right.
Anything else for anybody? Looks good. All right. Need a motion and a vote as well.
Motion of what?
Motion and a second to pass it.
Great. May I have a motion, please, to, oh, we already moved them.
Ready? Try to.
We just have to do,
We did.
we didn't move the calendars? Oh, all right, may I have a motion, please, to approve the calendars?
Okay, so moved.
So moved.
Take it away.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?
Okay, good.
Motion carries. Any items of new business? Seeing none. Public comment. Members of the public are invited to address the board on any matter for a maximum of 3 minutes during this portion of the meeting. You are asked to state your name, address, and municipality. In response to your comments, the Board of Education may respond or direct the superintendent to do so. The board may also opt to take the matter up at a future meeting so that the matter is researched by the district administration. Public comment is now open.
Still Melanie Phillips, Washington Crossing, Pennington Road, Hopewell Township. I don't feel that I got an answer the first time, so I'm back again trying to rephrase what I'm asking. I'm not sure with regards to the September 15th deadline. Why was that particular date decided? Why not 2 dates? Change seems to be made in August. Was there any time allotted for any parental input before that revision was passed by the board? With 83% of the school in the random drug testing pool, it kind of feels like an effort to just keep bolstering that number. And my concern as a former high school teacher myself is I think you're going to lose some of those kids that are already maybe not involved. So kids that are maybe more reserved and more introverted, who don't play sports, who don't do this, and they may decide to join that one thing, and that opportunity is going to be taken away from them because they didn't magically turn in that paper by a random date that you chose at the beginning of the year. So I would like that addressed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Dr. Smith, do you want to address the September 15th deadline?
Sure.
decision?
If I'm correct, you had a conversation with Ms. Pinelli too?
I did.
Okay, so it was chosen as a date that we could get information out to students. So we didn't do it September 1st or something like that, so at least they came back to school. So that's why the September the 15th date was allowing students to get back to school and have that information shared. They also went around to all the sports teams and shared that date also and the rationale. So the why is because, as I mentioned in the presentation, we had kids who would sign up and withdraw, and we were trying to avoid that, really making a more holistic approach. And we'll track the data. So at this point, we changed it. We changed it during the policy change was read twice in public. We did it specifically prior to the summer in June, so folks weren't concerned. We wouldn't say that you pushed it through in late August. But here we are with that anyway. The option, the options are that we review it, and we'll review it this year. And if we see any decrease in student participation, which we have not seen, and it's not about bolstering, it's more about students who we experienced it, and it wasn't many. However, we had students who signed up, then withdrew from it after their activity. Is at least one student admitted that it was in to get around the system. So.
Can I ask you a question on it?
Yeah.
Just thinking of the scenario of prom, which comes around late in the year.
Yep.
If a student is very antisocial, hasn't had any kind of interest, and then does get asked to prom, but they didn't sign up by September 15th, does that mean they cannot go to prom?
I think we would make exemptions to that. Certainly, I don't want anybody not to come to the
I
prom
understand the not
after that.
dropping.
No, yeah, but
When something comes up like that, it seems
understood. And I think I believe that we've been flexible in our application in terms of this for our students and making sure that there weren't any situations where a student was taken out of a program or didn't participate because of their refusal. However, I mean, you have to sign it to participate, but
but maybe they could sign it.
they sign it. Yeah, I mean, I think we would look at every situation individually.
I think
certainly.
maybe we should somehow, I don't know the right way to do it, but let that be known that
Mhm.
there's an individual case that comes up for an individual event. Please feel free to talk to Ms. Pinelli about
Yeah.
it or something, so that the students are aware of that, so it doesn't scare. I'm just thinking of a awkward 16-year-old girl who gets asked to prom and really wants to go but is afraid that she didn't sign the paper in time.
Yeah, I think we can I think we can work through that.
Thank you.
If that was your question, Mr. Phillips.
Just in general, I think you're shutting out an entire group of students. I don't think the word antisocial, but an entire group of students who, you know, maybe they don't participate in 20 things, and maybe something really sparks their interest in February, and now they're out. They can't join, and they don't have any chance for anything again until following September. The real world doesn't function like that. I don't make decisions 10 months in advance, and I think asking them to do that is not realistic.
What was the percentage of students that have opted in? It was in well into the 90s, right? Like maybe 90.
I think it was 85%.
Was it 85%?
I believe it's higher. I don't have it this year. It's 83.5%. Last year, 92% for 12th grade, 90%. 9th grade was the lowest.
I'm just going to dispute Craig's opinion. I know the other gentlemen
Understood.
have the same opinion, and I'm not saying I share all of his views, but I think it's being forced on students. I don't think they're opting.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, seeing none. May I have a motion, please, to go into executive session for harassment, intimidation, and bullying matters, and district security discussion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion carries. Thank you.